Hi everyone, so my name is Sophie, and as I was introduced, I'm from Queen Mary. I did actually study at Queen Mary and I graduated last summer. I did a subject called comparative literature, so not politics but still a humanities-based subject. And if you have any questions as we go along, maybe a little bit unrelated to the application process, so more about what it's like to be a student or studying, things like that, feel free to ask me as we go along, because obviously I can try and answer all those questions. But what I'm going to try and concentrate on today is mainly kind of the UCAS application, so your process obviously applying to university, which is where you start and is the most important thing. And I will then kind of go into detail about the personal statement, because that is one of the key elements of the UCAS application that's really going to help make the admissions tutor's decisions easier. So I'll talk you through that kind of process, and as we go along, feel free to ask me anything. So in terms of UCAS, it stands for the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. And this is how you apply to university, so you don't directly contact the university and email them over your CV or whatever. You go through this body called UCAS and you make your applications to universities through this one body. So it's an online form which you will kind of be led through the process at your school or college. So it's kind of a step-by-step process. So you don't need to necessarily take in all this information and understand it straight away. But it's just a good idea to get yourself thinking about what it's going to be like. So in terms of the form itself, so first of all, you just need to put your personal details. It's pretty basic. And then obviously you need to put down your university and course choices, and you will have five options. So by the time you get to
someone at the door.
By the time you get to filling out your UCAS form, it's really, really crucial that you've done all your research, you've done the research into the course, you know exactly which universities you want to apply to, you've been to open days, you've done all that kind of preliminary work. Because by the time you make your 5 choices on the UCAS form, you can't then change your decision afterwards and then decide, actually, no, I quite like the look of this university, can I change it? So make sure by the time you come around to doing the UCAS form, you've used your summer wisely, you've gone to open days, and you've done all your research with the courses. And one thing I will say as well, so obviously, you're all interested in politics courses, you will find that the courses will differ between institutions. So even though they might be called similar things, it's really, really worth looking into modules and course content, how the subject's taught, things like that, because you might find that one university's course is slightly more tailored to what your interests are in, rather than another one that, even though it sounds quite similar, it is quite different. So make sure before you're filling your UCAS form out, you've got all this information ready and prepared, and you've got to a stage where you know exactly the kind of places you want to go and the courses you want to study. You also need to upload all your qualifications, this will be crucial, I'll go into this shortly, and then the personal statement, which is kind of a key part of the form, and then also a teacher's reference, so I will cover these as we go along. So I've mentioned this, so a maximum of 5 choices can be made. It's a little bit different if you're applying to either medicine, dentistry or veterinary science, but you don't need to worry about that. So in terms of the key dates to think about, so the 1st of September is when you can apply to UCAS. And what you'll find, there is an earlier deadline for, so if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, or whether you're applying to medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine or veterinary science. So if you are applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you've got to bear in mind that the deadline is earlier for those universities. And then the 15th of January is the overall deadline for UCAS applications, but what you will find within your schools or colleges, they'll have an internal deadline, so perhaps around October half term, that they'll want you to all process your UCAS forms by. And this is really crucial, even though the general deadline is the 15th of January, universities will actually look at their applications as they get them in. So as they start receiving them in October, November, December, universities very well might be kind of processing them and giving out offers. They might not wait until the deadline. So it's important to stick to whatever your school's deadline is and make sure by the time you get back into year 13, after the summer, you're kind of prepared to get going with the form and send it off. And then end of February, this is UCAS Extra, so this is where you can basically apply to other universities if you so wish. It's another process that you will be kind of spoken through nearer the time, so you don't need to worry about that. And then the end of June is when that process closes, so late applications you can't apply anymore. And then mid-August is when you guys get your results, so very important days. And then obviously you'll be able to find out whether, in terms of you accepting your first choice and your, so when you make your first choice and your second choice, when you get your results in mid-August, you'll find out whether you can go to your first choice or whether you go to the second choice. If not, if you've missed the grades and that situation arises, then something called clearing opens, and that's where you can look through and see what universities and which courses are open for places, because when it comes to August and results day, not all universities have filled their quota of students, depending on, you know, if people have just missed out on grades or however it might work. So if you do miss out, then there is the clearing process. You can still look through and go to university in September. So in terms of this application process, there's a few websites here which is worth kind of looking on. Obviously in terms of going to open days, that's crucial, making sure you're doing your research early, and there's things like league tables. They're always a good guide to kind of make a reference point of where different universities are. So, you know, you can see how politics will rank between different universities, so not necessarily the university as a whole. It's good to look at it in the subject as well, because that's mainly what you're going to be concentrating on. And then the things like student room as well, you can look at forums of current students. That's always good to kind of hear from a student's perspective what they've got to say about the uni and the course as well. So in terms of the form, so this qualification, this is a really important aspect, obviously, of the application process. And you might find there are minimum GCSE requirements for a particular university. So when you're doing your research, it's really, really key that you're finding out whether there are actually some minimum GCSE requirements before you make the application. So obviously you need to check this all out before you actually put that university down on your UCAS form, because you obviously need to have those minimum requirements before you can apply. This is why it's important as well to be realistic with your grades, because obviously before you're, when you apply, it'll be before you get your final results, and you will have these predicted grades to work on. So it's really key to think realistically, okay, is this what I'm going to achieve? In terms of your 5 choices, have you got a couple of universities who are on those kind of grades, maybe one higher, one perhaps slightly higher, an optimistic choice, and maybe as well a university you're applying to which is a little bit below your predicted grade, so you have a backup if things don't go quite right. So you need to make sure you're being realistic and you've got those kind of grades in mind, so you know when you make your applications. And then also BAS module results you have to upload, so some universities will want to see what you got in year 12, and it will be important as well for them to see those specific subjects you're studying. Obviously with a course like politics, they will want to see that you've got some kind of related humanities subjects at A-level. What I know from in terms of admissions processes, if perhaps you don't have relevant A-levels, or maybe you don't have 3 subjects that really complement the degree programme that well, they will put kind of a heavy reliance on your personal statement. So you'll have to make sure that you're working extra hard with your personal statement to really boost and show why you want to study politics if you haven't got as much background in your A-levels. But either way, your qualifications and your predicted grades and things like that are really important. Admissions tests, these won't affect any of you, and this UK CAT as well. This is for medicine and dentistry, and we'll kind of bypass that. The teacher's reference, this is another element of the UCAS application, and obviously it's good to work closely with the teacher that's going to be writing your reference and making sure they're aware of the reasons of why you want to go to university and why you want to do this degree programme. They're obviously going to write a piece about you, and kind of it'll never be negative, but they need to know the information that's kind of best to put down in the reference. So make sure you're kind of working closely and they're aware of all the reasons, and you're kind of aware of what predicted grades they're thinking and you're thinking, and have these discussions if there's anything maybe you're a bit confused about, or maybe they're a bit confused about as well. So do kind of keep things going with the teachers. Obviously this reference will be a part of the application and they will be seen by admissions tutors. And then the most important part, you could say, of the application, other than the predicted grades, is the personal statement. So in terms of this personal statement, it is relatively short, and it's only around 700 words, which when you start writing and thinking about all your ideas, it goes in no words at all. So you really need to make sure that you're being very clear and precise about what you want to get across. So what I've got there is about 75% of your personal statement should focus on the subject, so on the degree programme that you're going on to study. Obviously that's the main reason why you're going to university, it's to get a degree in that particular specialised area. So it is crucial that the majority of your personal statement is focusing on that. So it's not necessarily talking all about your kind of extracurricular areas and your interests. It needs to be predominantly focused around the reasons why you want to study that degree programme. So why is a personal statement important? Obviously your teachers know you, your friends know you. They might understand the reasons why you want to go to university and why you might be good at this particular subject. But admissions tutors do not know anything about you. So all they can see in front of them are your predicted grades, your AS level results, the teacher's reference, and then this personal statement. And it's within that personal statement they get some kind of idea of what you're like as a character and what you can offer them at university. So it is really important to kind of make sure you are selling yourself to the best that you can, and you are getting across everything that you need to, because they don't know who you are and they can't just assume these things from anything other than what you've written. And obviously courses are oversubscribed, university is competitive, so they do need a different way to be able to differentiate students, because you'll find when you make your applications and maybe some grades will be A, B, B, or 2 A's and a B, or whatever the entry requirements might be, a lot of students will be predicted those grades. So it's with things like the personal statement and the AS results and the teacher's reference that admissions tutors are able to differentiate between students and then give offers. So it is careful to think, think clearly, this is going to help you get a place over another person who's predicted the same grades as me. So do demonstrate an informed decision. You don't need to sound fluffy or unsure about why you're going to university. Obviously admissions tutors need to see that you are committed and you've made a clear decision about why you want to study a particular subject and why you want to go to university at all. And it is a bit of a bizarre experience writing a personal statement, because you don't necessarily normally talk about yourself in that way in everyday life, but you obviously need to sell yourself, so do be positive. As we go on, I've got some kind of examples of personal statements and keywords to avoid and to try and use, but do be positive either way. It needs to be important that you are kind of remaining upbeat and you're not kind of underselling yourself in a way. So in terms of these admissions tutors, they are really busy and they will see lots and lots of applications. So in terms of what you're writing, you don't need to waffle, you don't need to add in lots of fancy big words just because you think it will sound good. They need to hear that you're getting to the point, and they're reading lots and lots of applications. They want to see a clear personal statement that gets across the ideas in a very, very relevant way. So in terms of what they're looking for, motivations, that's a clear element of the personal statements. They need to see detailed reasons. They need to see, why do you want to study that subject? What are your interests in politics? What have you done before this point to actually lead you to choosing a degree in politics? And then also evidence that you've done your research. Politics is a kind of subject where obviously you need a lot of background reading and kind of a real interest and a passion to be able to take it on a degree level. So the admissions tutors want to see that in your personal statement. So whether it's days like today, so later on you'll be having lectures and things like that, that's all an exciting thing to mention, the fact that you've had these taster days, you've had these opportunities to experience maybe what it would be like to study politics, and say why that's inspired you or why that's excited you. And then also if you've got career aspirations, so if you know exactly what you want to do, whether you want to work in the UN or for Amnesty International or whatever it might be, whether it's directly politics related or whether it's kind of a string off doing a politics degree that will kind of lead you to that position, it's really good to see that you have got a motivation. Obviously don't worry if you don't know what you want to do afterwards. I know when I was writing my personal statement I had no idea, so you don't have to put down a job that you want to do just for the sake of it. It's just good to include if you do have a particular aspiration. But either way, it's good to include different life experiences, so things that maybe initially might not seem relevant, so they're not necessarily school or A-level related, but actually as we go through a few of the examples, we'll be able to see actually how different students have brought in life experiences to make it relevant to their degree choice. So it's always good to think about those kind of motivations as well. And obviously this is key for a degree surrounding politics, so awareness of current affairs. You obviously need to show that you're up to date with the news, you're linking your studies to the outside world, because that is the whole point with politics. It's not just kind of insular and reading a book and that's it. You need to obviously have awareness of what's going around, how this degree relates to everyday affairs. So do show evidence that you do reading, whether it's, you watch Question Time or you read particular magazines and you keep up with different affairs. It's really good to just show that you have an interest outside of just your studies at school. You've actually took time of your own free time to do all this reading and research. And then obviously academic ability. So when it comes down to a subject like politics or any kind of academic subject, they're going to need to see that you do have that kind of academic standing to go on and study this kind of degree. So in terms of your A-levels, they are really good to bring in. How many of you study subjects that are related around politics? Does everyone? Does anyone not study anything related to politics? Just you. Okay, that's fine. So, other than yourself, it's really important to talk about those A-level subjects that you've done. And for yourself, obviously, not to worry that you don't study anything related to politics. But as I was saying, it's going to be key for you to try and bring in your outside interests, your outside motivations. Obviously, there's a reason why you want to do this degree programme, because it's not related to your A-levels. There must be some kind of motivation for you. So just make sure you're kind of concentrating on that. And obviously for the rest of you, you can bring in your A-levels, you can bring in maybe bits of coursework that you've studied, or whether it's certain things you've read, or certain topics that have really kind of excited you within that area. So it's important to bring in that kind of relevant academic area into your personal statement. And obviously when you go to university, academic tutors, admissions tutors, they want to take on students that are obviously going to stay committed to that degree programme. Most degrees are 3 or 4 years long, and that is quite a lengthy time to stay committed at one subject. Obviously it doesn't seem a long time if you're really interested and you're passionate about a particular subject, but they need to see that you have got that staying power, and you're not someone that kind of flakes out of different things and perhaps hasn't held down any jobs or hasn't got any kind of process leading up to this choice to go to university. So it's important that, I guess this kind of comes in the other 25% of your personal statement, but this is a good time to bring in, so not necessarily academic achievements, but anything maybe whether it's sport related or any kind of musical kind of things that you do, anything that actually shows the position of responsibility that you've maintained over a period of years or time. So if you do have part-time work or you volunteer once a week, something that doesn't necessarily have to relate directly to your degree, but shows your kind of character and shows that you are committed as an individual to a particular path. So it's good to think about that and maybe think about the different things you do at school or you do outside of school over years. Maybe some of you do have part-time work. But make sure when you're writing your personal statement, you're not just writing the fact, I have a part-time job in this shop, full stop. You need to expand on that, and you need to say, what have you learned, what does this show? It might seem obvious to you, but obviously to an admissions tutor, they need to see how you think that you've learned from this experience. So it's good to think kind of outside of the academic and also include those kind of aspects as well. And then relevant work experience. So for a subject like politics, there are some subjects like medicine, law, where relevant work experience is extremely important. And in terms of your applications, it will be unlikely for you to be let in if you haven't had any relevant work experience. With politics, it's a little bit different. What's good to mention, if you have had relevant work experience, obviously you need to talk about that. If you haven't already, then that's absolutely fine, and it's worth obviously thinking about other things you've done, so whether it's lectures that you've attended or taster days or anything kind of extra that you've kind of gone off your back to attend and to look into. So don't worry too much if you haven't had tons of work experience that you can talk about, but just make sure you've got other stuff to kind of mention if you haven't got kind of set placements. But in terms of work experience, I guess it does help you get an idea of what it'd be like to go into that career. So I guess you could mention if you do have a career aspiration and you've experienced that through maybe work experience, kind of what that showed you and how that's kind of developed your understanding. So it's good to think about those things as well. So I briefly mentioned kind of outside interests like sports and hobbies and things like that. Admissions tutors do want to see that the university student is a well-rounded individual, because obviously when you go to university, you're not necessarily just there to get a degree. There's a whole university life surrounding it as well. How many of you are thinking of moving away from home? Okay, almost everyone. I moved away from home as well before I came to London, and that in itself is a big experience and a big transition. So it's important to show that actually you as a character will be able to deal with that transition and it won't be too much for you. So you know, you've done other things outside of your academic to show that you've got kind of different interests and different achievements, and actually you making that transition from staying at home and going to school and moving away to this new environment and studying a new degree is not going to be too much for you, so you will be able to adapt. So I think it's just important to show that you're an adaptable character and you have got other aspects of your personality that will kind of fit well with that university life. I mean, obviously, if you are thinking of moving away from home, I guess that in itself shows that you're willing to make that step. So I guess just think about how you would be able to cope with that and kind of how that will translate into dealing with university as a whole. So what not to include in your personal statement. This might seem obvious. Don't put any inappropriate language. Don't put any negative comments. This first one about information about one particular university, you do have to be quite careful, because when you do your UCAS application forms to 5 universities and 5 courses, you just have one personal statement. So it's not a case of for each university and each course of that university you can write a separate statement and really tailor the personal statement to the modules they offer and their university. You know, it can't be that tailored. And obviously, if you're writing specific information about one particular university in your personal statement, when another university reads it and they say, well, actually this is not true about our course, this is not true about what they're talking about in terms of our university, then they'll obviously see through that. So you do need to be careful and not kind of put all your hopes to one university and then just concentrate and tailor your personal statement to that. Obviously 5 different universities will see the statement and it needs to be relevant for all. And what I was saying about similar course titles differing between institutions, it's that kind of idea that you do need to be careful with. So in terms of looking at modules and looking into the course content, that's really, really important. But in terms of your personal statement, maybe only bring in aspects of modules that you'd be studying that are obvious between each of those 5 universities. So don't pick out a module that is just individual to one. See if there are links and comparisons that you can directly bring into your personal statement.
Sorry, just very quickly at this point, because lots of people, I think, might be applying for joint honours degrees.
Okay.
So that's relevant too. It's not just about your modules, but it's about the other subject you might want to study with quantity.
Yeah, so in terms of joint honours programmes, there might be universities, so within your 5 choices, you might be applying to 3 universities that are joint honours programmes and 2 universities that are single honours. How you get around that in your personal statement is obvious that you have to include the joint honour aspect in your personal statement. But I guess just do not have that overpowering the rest of your statement. So you need to adapt your statement into aspects of the other subjects you'll be joining onto, because that will be relevant for 3 of the applications. But make sure it doesn't kind of overpower it and make it seem like it's just the joint honours programme you're interested in. Obviously, with joint honours, there are overlaps anyway. You don't do joint honours that are completely different. So there will be comparisons that hopefully will naturally flow when you write your personal statement. But I guess just bear that in mind when you are writing, that some of them maybe will be joint honours and some of them will be just the single honours. And then finally, so information included elsewhere on the UCAS form. So you don't need to spend part of your personal statement listing off all your AS grades or your A-level, your predicted grades. These things will be already on the form, so be careful not to waste words mentioning things that have already been talked about. So in terms of how to write it, don't necessarily think you need to start at the beginning, so don't spend ages working out how to start this personal statement, because obviously your beginning couple of lines are really important and they need to be punchy and they need to kind of make sure they've got the admissions tutor's attention. So don't get too caught up with starting with those first few lines. Just kind of make notes, and I'd recommend on a piece of paper chucking down all your ideas of what kind of things that you want to include in a personal statement. So start thinking about, you know, the A-level options that are related, or any work experience or part-time work, extracurricular activities, everything that you might think is relevant. Even kind of put down your key personality traits on a piece of paper, and then as you start kind of working and planning, you'll be able to kind of get rid of some of those that you don't think are as relevant when you realise that, okay, you've only got 700 words to mention all of those things. And do write multiple drafts, and also when you're reading your personal statement over and over again, you kind of become a little bit numb to what you're writing. So make sure you're getting your parents to read it, or your teachers or any friends, kind of swap personal statements. Obviously be careful with the other colleagues to not kind of plagiarise, that's a definite key point. But do get other people to read over your personal statement, so with a fresh pair of eyes they're noticing if there's kind of a grammatical error, or whether some things maybe not so important. So do kind of rewrite different versions. And in terms of the plagiarism, it's really, really important. It's quite easy nowadays to just go online, type in good personal statement politics or whatever, and then comes up lots of different options and beginnings and endings and good kind of cliched phrases. This will all be online, and you electronically submit your UCAS form, and there are lots of systems in place where they can pick up plagiarism. In terms of our essays, actually, when we submit them online, they have a plagiarism system where it comes up with a percentage that they would deem you having plagiarised, and if it's over a certain percentage, then it kind of sparks up as an issue. Obviously, you might kind of accidentally plagiarise to some extent, because there are key phrases and things that you maybe would put. So don't worry too much. Obviously, if you're not plagiarising, you won't be caught out for plagiarism. But if you are extracting sentences and paragraphs and already written personal statements, that will show up. So do be careful. And obviously, with a personal statement, it says it in its title, it's personal. It needs to be individual to yourself, and I guess that's the reason. That's the reason why it's important to have a statement to go to the university, because you get to show off yourself, and you get to, you know, show that you're an individual and you have different things to offer from your friend or colleague. So it's important that this is really personal. So in terms of the structure, I mean, this is not set in stone, it's just kind of the way that I've looked at it. But in terms of starting your personal statement, so in the first section, make sure you're getting across the reasons behind the course choice, behind your application. Then possibly talk about experience related to course, so whether it's A-levels or other experience, and then a broad demonstration of skills, so any kind of personality traits that you may have or you've learned or developed. And then kind of towards the end, kind of include your extracurricular activities, so the information that's not so associated to the course itself. And then finally, I guess, career aspirations, that's maybe a good thing to mention at the end, or any kind of concluding sentence that's kind of going to round up in a punchy way why you want to study this particular subject. So a few good words to use. Some of these seem quite obvious, and there's just a few on the screen. Be careful, do be careful not to waffle. And I think it's quite easy when you're trying to sell yourself and write in this positive manner to get caught up in lots of big words and phrasings. Admissions tutors will see past that, so it's not going to sound really big and clever to include lots of big and clever words, because they might not necessarily be relevant to what you're saying. So try not to synonym every word just to make it sound fancier, because there's some personal statements that I've read that don't really make any sense. Like, the words sound pretty, but they don't really make sense as a sentence. So do be careful and avoid that kind of waffle, and make sure you're getting across quite concisely. Words to avoid. Obvious things like hate and problems and panic. These are just, yeah, quite clear words to avoid. But then words like maybe always and nothing, they are a little bit more ambiguous. And what I mean by always and nothing is that generally when you're speaking, you don't, if you say something is always the case or is never the case, I don't think it's actually true. Like, you're never 100% of the time going to be always doing this or never being doing this. You need to be careful not to sound too dramatic with your personal statement, is what I'm trying to say. Obviously, in certain forms, in certain sentences, those words might make sense, but generally I think it's good to not be too dramatic with your statements and make out that you're always watching Question Time or you're always doing this. So try and get the points across, but not in such a dramatic way. So I've got a few examples of personal statements, and these are actually from Queen Mary applicants, and these are students that have been given a place. So these are examples that obviously kind of have gone through the process and have received an offer and have started on a particular course. So they are good. They're not necessarily perfect and they're individual, but it's worth kind of having a look at, I guess, to get across certain things. So this first one. It is my intention to study politics at university as I've developed a keen interest in the subject. The point at which I became fascinated with politics was whilst visiting my home country Libya in year 10. Witnessing the damaging effects of a dictatorship firsthand, I realised the importance of democracy to modern day civilization. I was enthralled by my grandparents' stories of the military coup that hindered my homeland's ability to develop. Now, obviously with that paragraph, it's interesting. It's obviously bringing on life experiences, and I'm not saying that each and every one of you is going to have something as like that to talk about necessarily, but it's good to think about maybe life experiences and family members or things that have happened that have kind of inspired you to take down this route. Obviously with this student there is a clear reason and there's clear kind of interest into why she's following this path. And then the next one, I enjoy keeping in touch with current affairs by following programmes such as DOA debates and Question Time. As of late, I've been closely following the US and Libyan elections. So just with that small sentence, it's kind of dropping in some things that she does in her spare time, kind of looking at outside of the academics, outside of school. This is not something that the person would be doing in their school time. So it shows that outside of their actual school life, they're developing and they have got